magnificent. They, you know,
Right.
go back into the files and pick out little.
Before his death, Ed Sullivan named 6 old country music stars he hated most. Here's the whisper that never made it to air. In his final stretch, the stone-faced king of Sunday night allegedly rattled off a private list of old-school country stars he just could not stand. Not because they couldn't sing, because they wouldn't bend. The names? 6 legends with boots planted deep in the red dirt, all of them stubborn, all of them unforgettable. If you think Ed Sullivan was the untouchable gatekeeper who made careers with a nod, wait until you hear who pushed back, who walked out, and who calmly smiled while the control booth turned the dials and prayed the clock would behave. Let's be real about Ed. He prized order, timing, and control. He liked clean camera lines, tidy cues, and performers who hit their marks without a fuss. Most nights he got exactly that. But country music, real country, thrives on human mess, sweat, stumble, grit, a voice that cracks at the end of a sentence because the story hurts. Put that spirit under bright studio lamps and there will be sparks. And when those sparks flew, the old newspaper man didn't always enjoy the heat. He could admire it, sure, the same way a zoo director admires a tiger, but he still preferred a thick pane of glass between himself and the teeth. Name one man who embodied that clash better than Merle Haggard. The tale is legendary in Nashville and New York alike. In 1970, with Okie-era Furnace Hot, producers tried lining Merle up for a prim bouquet from a Broadway meadow. They wanted Rodgers and Hammerstein. He wanted Bakersfield steel and a Telecaster heartbeat. Rehearsals dragged, choreography appeared, and the hillbilly poet looked around at the figure eights and smiled that half-dangerous smile. The next lap around the set, he didn't stop. He kept drifting, right off the stage and out to the bus, leaving a trail of baffled clipboard holders and a dressing room that still smelled like fresh starch. You can dress the man in spotlight powder, you can't make him fake a grin while someone else picks the song. That walkout wasn't just stubbornness, it was a line in the sand. Translation for the big city. If the lyric isn't mine to live, it isn't mine to sing. If Haggard was the walk-off, Johnny Cash was the stare-down. When the man in black strode into Studio 50, he wasn't there to play nice with electricity and cue lights. He was there to tell a story in that low boom that made sinners sit up straighter. Backstage talk insists there was a dust-up over how dark the stage ought to be. Cash loved shadow, Ed loved visibility. Somewhere between midnight church and neon noon, a compromise happened, the way it always does when 2 immovable objects share a clock. Cash tipped his hat, the crew fiddled with a dimmer like it was the launch key to a rocket, and a ballad rolled out heavy enough to dent the floor. Nobody threw a punch, nobody had to. The mood won, even if the lumens stayed a hair brighter than Johnny would have liked. Hank Williams Sr. wasn't built for television niceties either. By the time that pale, haunted baritone had soaked into the American songbook, live TV still felt like a parade ground for tidy smiles and big gestures. Old hands traded a story about Hank asking for fewer cue cards so he could ride the melody instead of reading it. Somebody kept shoving new cards into the lens as if lyrics needed training wheels. Hank winked, ignored them, and sang anyway, leaving a certain host muttering that the cardboard was stealing the show. Whether every word of that tale is dead-on true doesn't matter. It captures the bigger truth. Real country prefers risk. The best lines arrive from the gut, not from a clipboard. And any system that tries to tame that gets treated like background furniture. Loretta Lynn made the same room spin for different reasons. She didn't fight, she floated. Producers loved a fixed camera. Loretta loved motion. She told a director sweet as iced tea and twice as firm, "Sugar, follow my feet." Then she drifted like smoke, letting the crowd's energy tug her where the lyric landed best. A boom mic chased her, camera 3 hustled, and the laughter that rolled off the audience said everything. Ed applauded, of course he did, but he also liked marks taped on the floor, and a singer who blew past the tape might as well have winked at him and stolen his pencil. Loretta wasn't lawless, she was fearless. That's a difference you feel in your chest. George Jones confronted a different kind of fence. The teleprompter sat there like a silent chaperone, insisting every line arrive on schedule. George stared at it and asked for mercy. A love song shouldn't feel like reading off a grocery list, and Jones was the opposite of grocery store music anyway. He was cracked china, rain at noon, a hand shaking over an empty glass. The folklore says Ed relented. One rehearsal, no glass screen. And when the moment came, Jones didn't just remember the lines. He carved them in the air, like initials on wet cement. Afterward, someone swears they heard Ed, pride sneaking through the fuss, mutter, "Fine." The man doesn't need words. He writes them. Then there's Buddy Holly, and if you're thinking he's not country, look again. Rockabilly is hillbilly with jumper cables, and Lubbock's soil grows both. Buddy walked into Ed's world with a grin that could cut glass and a set list he wouldn't change. The show wanted gentle, he wanted oh boy. The rumor mill claims the sound mix turned tricky, the intro got misfired, and a name got said wrong on purpose. Buddy did what West Texas kids do when the grown-ups get fussy. He smiled, turned up his attack, and played like the only way out was straight through. The applause told the truth that the cue sheets wouldn't. Control can win the rehearsal, but energy owns the broadcast. So did Ed truly hate these six? Hate is a blunt instrument. What he hated was losing the reins. He understood opera robes, Broadway pageantry, and tidy choreography. He respected mastery, and every one of these names had that in spades, but they carried it differently. With them, mastery wasn't tuxedo smooth. It was nicked and scarred and alive. The camera loves alive. The control booth does not. Ed tried to square that circle every Sunday, a human metronome tapping through chaos, and most nights he won. On the nights he didn't, America remembered the stumbles longer than the spectaculars. Merle's walkout echoed because it exposed the big city habit of treating country artists like props in someone else's pageant. Ask a man who came up in honky-tonks to fake a musical comedy smile and he'll show you the door, not because he's surly, but because the songs he sings weren't built in costume closets. Merle's refusal said out loud that authenticity is not a cute accessory, it's oxygen. Ed dealt in spectacle. Merle insisted on oxygen. That will make any polite room uncomfortable. And here's the kicker. The audience at home sensed it. They can smell varnish from a mile away, and they leaned forward when the shine cracked. Johnny Cash brought a different discomfort. Gravity. He could sing to 2,000 or 2 million. Either way, he made a crowd feel like the lights just dimmed in their own soul. Variance in the dimmer switch may sound like a small thing, but it's the difference between carnival and confession. Confession is messy on television. It doesn't wink on cue. It doesn't hit the cymbal splash exactly at the half hour. When Johnny intoned a ballad about regret, timing turned elastic, and a host famous for clockwork felt time bend. You can sense that tension even watching old clips. The song keeps breathing while the red light wants to cut. Hank's ghost stirs up the edgiest feelings. He died young, leaving behind songs so pure they still find you where you hide. Imagine trying to staple cue cards onto thunder. The story, true or trimmed by time, captures the fundamental mismatch. Television wants insurance. Hank wanted risk. You can mark a line on a card, but you can't mark a cracked open heart. Ed, a planner by nature, never fully trusted risk unless it bowed before airtime. Yet even he had to admit that when a voice carries that much ache, rules melt. That's why the legend keeps moving. It explains what the paperwork never could. Loretta understood that the camera can be a jailer or a dance partner. All it takes is one fearless step and a smile that says, "Keep up." That night she taught the lens to behave, and the lens obeyed. She did not humiliation wrestle the show into her mold, she charmed it. That difference matters. Ed admired charisma, even when charisma refused to stand still long enough for the teleprompter to high-five it. You can picture him afterward telling the team it worked, but also telling them not to let the boom fly quite so free next week. He liked surprises. so long as they reported to him first. George Jones's stand against the prompter felt small compared to Merle's exit or Buddy's sonic defiance, but it stabbed at the heart of what makes country music powerful. Country isn't a recitation, it's confession with meter. Removing the glass was a symbolic mercy, like taking the training wheels off a champion's bike. Ed's world liked guarantees. George delivered goosebumps instead. No safety net, no digital crutch, just a man and the ache he couldn't quite fix, written line by line across his voice. People remember that kind of singing the way they remember a storm, not by the calendar date, but by the feeling. Buddy Holly's on-air storm is where the myth machine shifts into fifth. Maybe the introduction was flubbed, maybe the guitar feed got pinched. The only facts that matter are the grin, the strum, and the way a studio audience realized in real time that youth doesn't ask permission. Ed had handled Elvis. He had wrangled doo-wop and Broadway choruses. But Buddy came bearing the future, not an application. The suit and the smile were polite. The sound was a jailbreak. You can understand why a man devoted to Polish would quietly resent a kid who made rough edges look like a choice, not an accident. If these moments make Ed sound like a villain, don't forget the paradox. He booked them. He fought, flinched, and sometimes scolded, but he also opened his door when other doors stayed bolted. Without that stage, millions of living rooms never meet the thunder. Maybe that's why the rumored end-of-life list stings. It reads less like petty spite and more like an old editor's marginalia, X through what refused to be edited. He didn't hate the artists. He hated the parts of himself that couldn't keep them within the margins. The funny part is that his name still sits on the marquee of their legends. The gossip does add color. There were whispers about late-night fumes, about outlaw habits, about little paper trails and tall glasses that put cracks in otherwise perfect nights. Some of those murmurs belong to the broader era. Cannabis jokes in a dressing room, a bump of coke bragged about by a hanger-on, outlaw ballads that sounded just a shade too autobiographical. Television never wants to know the specifics. It wants the shine. Country wants the truth, even when the truth leaves a mark. Ed wanted shine on schedule. These six wanted the truth, whatever time it arrived. Think about how each name tested a different boundary. Merle tested repertoire. Johnny tested mood. Hank tested preparation. Loretta tested staging. George tested machinery. Buddy tested authority. That's 6 fences, 6 bold attempts to push the corral wider, all happening on the most watched program in the country. It's almost funny to picture Ed in his suit, eyes tight, jaw set, palms clapping, mind counting the seconds to commercial while a song refused to behave. That was the show's secret sauce. Chaos had a key card. The rumor says Ed's list lived in anecdotes, not paper. A breath at a booth, a sidelong groan to a producer, a drive home where he told someone he trusted. That one again? Over my dead body. Well, time has its own sense of humor, and here we are, still gossiping, still pressing our ears to the stage door to hear who got under his skin. The answer isn't hard. Anyone who couldn't be domesticated. Anyone who turned a tidy outline into a living story. Anyone who drew a deeper breath than television likes to allow. And maybe that is why the hate headline grabs attention, but the truth lands softer. Ed respected toughness. He just wanted it trimmed for airtime. These 6 refused the trim. They showed up with human-sized tempos, sudden swerves, and a refusal to fake a grin. America recognized itself in that refusal. Families in Kansas and Queens alike saw a little of their own kitchen table grit in those moments when a singer shrugged off the guardrails. You can practically hear the collective exhale. Finally, something that isn't pretending. Picture the telephone lines on those nights glowing with moms calling sisters and teenagers dialing friends off the rotary, talking fast about the song that stepped over the tape. Picture the next morning in barbershops and cafeterias, the split verdict. The show looked a mess. The show felt real. Ed stood in the middle, both proud and perturbed. That's the honest portrait of a man who aimed to curate America and discovered America refuses curation. He kept booking the danger anyway because the ratings never lie and the mailbags got heavier after the ruckus. So when you hear that Ed Sullivan allegedly picked 6 country names for his private no-thanks list, don't think of a petty scorecard. Think of a complicated handshake between tradition and rebellion. The handshake hurt sometimes. It made tempers spike and producers sweat. But it also made the music roar. When Merle refused to play dress-up, when Johnny insisted on mood, when Hank treated cue cards like polite suggestions, when Loretta taught a lens how to waltz, when George nixed the glass and trusted his memory, when Buddy smiled through a sand in the gears mix and still lit the room, the audience felt something they could trust. Old television leaned on lines, boxes, and schedules. Old country leaned on courage, feel, and the kind of honesty that scares people who bet their jobs on predictability. That's a collision worth remembering. Ed's alleged list. Call it what it really was. A map of every place his control ended and their magic began. And that boundary, that crack where the light got in, is exactly where viewers fell in love and refused to change the channel. It's where country brushed its shoulders, fixed its hat, and showed a prim nation what living sounds like. Now it's your turn. Think about those 6 nights, those 6 flavors of defiance, and ask yourself what survives longer, the applause that hits on time or the shaky breath that arrives late and true. If you found yourself leaning closer to the screen, heart thudding, grinning because someone just broke a tiny TV rule in service of something real, you already know the answer. Ed, with all his clout, couldn't tame that wild current. He opened the door to it even when it drove him damn near crazy. And that, ironically, is why his show still matters. We remember the fights because the music won. So before he signed off for good, imagine Ed gathering the producers, tapping the stack of blue cards and getting unusually candid. Some of these folks, he might have said, make a hell of a mess of my rundown. Then after a beat only a showman understands, the tiniest smile. Book 'em anyway. Because deep down, even the sternest editor knows the rule that keeps an audience from flipping away. Surprise them. Tell the truth fast, and never ever let the energy sit down. These 6 did exactly that, week after week, rumor after rumor, and the country never sounded the same. And if you're still here, you're exactly the kind of listener these artists fought for. Someone who cares more about a heartbeat than a headline. Drop your take below. Whose moment hit hardest? Merle's no thanks, Cash's hush, Hank's wink, Loretta's glide, George's glassless gamble, or Buddy's grin. Stick around, because the deeper we dig into old television's prim smile and country's wild soul, the more we discover that friction isn't a flaw, it's the secret spark that keeps the story burning for us. But here's the twist everyone forgets when the credits roll. Television changes people, and people quietly change television right back. In hallways, you could watch it happen between breaths tonight. A song exhaled, a clock complained, and compromise blinked twice. Country learned patience. The show learned how to breathe together. That awkward dance built a bridge nobody admitted they needed. Everybody crossed it, even while pretending nothing had shifted inside. By curtain fall, both sides felt braver and slightly dangerous. Risk sold better than polish whenever the risk felt human. That secret never appeared on cue cards or sponsor memos. There's a reason their dust still sparkles under rerun lights. Merle's stubborn no drew a line nobody dared repaint afterward. Cash hushed the room until hearts beat like bass drums. Hank winked at rules and kept his thunder uncaptioned nightly. Loretta glided and the lens followed like a spell willingly. George trusted memory, and memory proved sharper than glass screens. Buddy grinned, kicked forward, and played through any mixed signals. They made the room honest and collected permanent applause afterward. Curtains iron flat, but charisma keeps deliberate creases visible forever. Every crease points back to choosing feeling over convenience always. So carry the myth carefully and tell it forward kindly. Explain how a tidy show cracked open for lightning once. Explain how a fussy era allowed a little danger inside. Explain how a stern host midwifed scenes that outlived him. Imagine those blue cards smudged, framed behind museum glass someday. Caption them plainly. Used nightly, broken nightly, cherished anyway, forever. That is the rumor's heart and the headline's correction combined. Ed wanted order, the music wanted life, viewers wanted spark. He kept his brand while they kept their souls fiercely. Between them leapt fire, and it still lights nights everywhere.